Awesome. There was a little cheating because I know a slide gave the answer, but yes, I'd like to hear from you.
So partnership is simply working together. Okay.
Awesome. And that's what I said too. I mean, my definition of it is connection and collaboration around a shared goal. So similar. The official definition is partnerships are powerful tools that enable organizations, entities, or individuals to leverage their collective strength and resources. There's a lot of stuff. But really, it's how do we communicate together? How do we collaborate? How do we work together to make something better? And so if we go to the next slide, why? Why are partnerships important? It's just that everything's better with friends. Everything's better with more people. And particularly when we are talking about something as important as the SDGs, which impact lives, which impact work, the more people that we can bring on to partner with, not only helps us increase reach and gives us mutual benefit, but we have a shared objective. And I like to think of kind of the sum of everything being better than its parts. So there's three kind of main types of partnerships that we'll touch on, and I'll give you kind of some examples and some things that I've worked with, but I know that there's probably so many examples in this room of these types of partnerships. And sometimes in our programming and in our organizations, we actually use all of these types of partnerships. So the first that we talk about a lot in the SDGs is public-private partnerships. And you guys will be pretty familiar with these. It's government organizations that are partnering with private institutions. And so an example of this would be like a school system for a city, or maybe even a country that's public, partnering with a private tech company who then puts computers and gives STEM mentorship to the school system. The second is academic partnerships. So often organizations will partner with a university to help increase research or to put out papers or to put out thought leadership, and that's another way of partnering. And then nonprofit partnerships between several different nonprofit organizations is the third kind of partnership. And all of these are talking about institutions, but I started out by saying that I love stories. I'm a storyteller. I think stories are so important. And really, people work for institutions, and people decide who to partner with. And people don't give to institutions, they give to stories that matter, they give to causes that move them, they give to impact that they can feel. And so I think the biggest part of being really good at driving partnerships is telling your story. Why do you need a partnership? What's exciting about what you're doing? What's changing things? Who's impacted by your work? And really being able to tell that story in a way that means something to your potential partner, that shares values with your potential partner, is to me the biggest piece of really driving a partnership forward. I like to think of partnerships as relationships that we have with anybody. And someone actually said this to me the other day, and I thought, this makes sense. You wouldn't ask someone to marry you on the first date, would you? Who would do that? Now, we know a lot of people in the room. For those of you online, you can put a comment in there about it. Most people, not all, wouldn't say yes to marry someone on the first date. They generally wouldn't ask. And yet in partnerships, we kind of have this idea, or there's this story that we're told about this very charismatic person who walks into a room and they're just so good at schmoozing with people that they walk away with $100 million in an hour. It's pretty unlikely. It's not that that never happens, but it's quite unlikely for a number of different reasons. And I actually really believe that if this relationship was cultivated in a more meaningful way, they probably could get a lot more out of the partnership and a lot more money if they look at it like any type of relationship. And relationships take effort, they take time, they take communication, they take feedback, they take all of those different elements. And I think all of this is really important when we talk about building relationships. And so I kind of have a rule of thumb when I am going to a partner, or particularly a funder, and I call it my 3 to 5 rule, meaning that there needs to be at least 3 to 5 interactions. They don't have to be huge interactions. They don't always have to be face-to-face, but just these little touch points with a potential partner so that you're developing a relationship. So for example, if you were on a first date with someone, you generally talk about your shared interests, right? What do we have in common? Do we have the same commonality? Would we work together, right? And so that's kind of, in many ways, the first way that we start a partnership. What do we have in common? I can give you an example of a $1 million funder that I worked with. And over the year, I didn't just walk into a room and ask him. It actually took about 7 different small interactions over the year to get this gift. And the first one was really just meeting with him and saying, what did you like about our program? What didn't you like? How can we make it better? And the second one was bringing a board member in, and helping that board member articulate, what are we doing with funding? Why is this important? The third one was, catching up over a phone call and saying, can we send you a proposal? There's all of these little steps. And so I always recommend, after every small meeting, can you then have in your mind, what can the next step be? Maybe the next step is a small email. Maybe the next step is inviting this person to come and see your work, but kind of have an idea of building a relationship in the same way that you would build a relationship with anyone. And I can give you another example of how this hasn't worked that well. I was at a conference with a colleague, and we were sitting a few tables away from a billionaire. And so this colleague was like, I'm going to take my chance. I'm going to go up and introduce myself. And so she went to introduce herself. She was like, hi, my name is, let's call her Susie. And she said, this is the organization I work for. This is our project. Will you give us $1 million? What do you think that billionaire said? No, I mean, it was super awkward, right? Yeah. Firstly, it wasn't the right place. There was a ton of other people around. Secondly, it was kind of like, oh, we didn't take the time to ask anything about that person or see if we had shared interests. It was just like we were basically asking the person to marry us without, forget first date, it was like in the first 2 seconds, right? And I think a lot of times we think that approach is like, well, we have only a small opportunity with this person. Let me take my chance. But actually, had we said, you know what, it's so nice to meet you. I love what you're working on. I'd love to share what we're working on a little bit more. Can I follow up with an email and maybe have a little bit more time to share this later? It would have been so much more effective. So how to find potential partners? I like to think of a model that I often use called LEA. And 3 things that I think really need to be present for a partnership to be successful or a funder to say yes is a linkage to your organization, an interest in your organization, and an ability to give. And so I think linkage is actually the most important thing. Do you have anything in common? Is there any reason that they would be interested in your project or what you're doing? So for example, when we think about funding, often someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates will come up. They have lots of money. Maybe they'll fund our project, right? But the question to ask is, do they have any linkage to your organization or your work at all? And if they don't, then maybe you can find another prospect. Your work might also be to create a stronger linkage. So maybe there's a board member you have in common. Maybe you can invite them to come and see what you're doing or sit on a panel for something you're running or to be a judge of something you're working on. Leah, you talked about that before in the debating things. Maybe there's a judge that you could bring into something you're doing. How do you create that linkage? So then when you're asking them for a bigger partnership, there is some common mutual understanding and interest. And then the third thing, ability. Ability we often look at just as funding. Do they have the capacity to give? Now, there's a lot of different ways that people can partner with us that are not just about giving. And they may have an ability in a different way than just funding. So for example, this year I helped to launch a Global Innovation Prize for Youth. And on the surface of it, when we needed partners, what we really needed was partners to give us funding to help sponsor the prizes, right? That obviously we needed funding, we needed money. But when we really stopped to think outside the box of who are all our stakeholders, who are all the stakeholders that touch these prizes, there was tons of things we needed. And some of these partnerships that came on that had nothing to do with money were actually mentorship. So mentoring the projects that came on and giving expertise, and all these different companies came on as mentors. A network. So a lot of these CEOs or people from different companies didn't necessarily give money, but they opened their network to some of these projects. Media support, social media support, such a huge thing right now. Physical space in some of these communities was a huge thing. Volunteers or board members. For our prize, we actually got all the consulting services for free, which was a huge relief on our staff. We had research partners, we had other alliances. So I just really encourage the thought of what are all the possible stakeholders that could touch this. And the other thing I'll say too is when I was talking about dating earlier before, what are your deal breakers? You're allowed to have deal breakers. You're allowed to have standards, right? And so if you as a team or you as an individual also stop and say, not only do I want to map out all the stakeholders that I have, but what are my absolute no's? It might be that your organization doesn't want to work with anyone that invests in fossil fuels. It may be that your organization actually has a small team. And so if there's lots of reporting requirements or a lot of staff time that's involved in just the partnership itself that would be taking away from the work, that might be a no for you. So as much as you're thinking about building the relationship, you're also thinking about what works for me, what are our boundaries, and what are we willing to partner on. So I'm going to give you guys kind of an out-of-the-box example of this that doesn't touch on the SDGs, but I'll tell you why I think it's important. I mentioned when I was opening that I'm a singer-songwriter, and that's one of the ways that I've actually learned to build a lot of partnerships, and it's helped me a lot through my career outside of music. So a few years ago, this is me and my little brother up there, and my little brother, who is 34 now, will always be my little brother forever and ever. And I released an album, and my idea was to tour it across Canada, which is where we lived. And really the goal was to be able to bring that album across Canada in the most cost-effective way, and also to gain a bigger audience. And so really when we looked at the budget, the biggest budget items were transportation and accommodation to actually tour this album. And so we kind of thought about that and how we might be able to cut costs there. I chose my brother as my guitarist, which is one very important partnership that was also very cost effective, I'll say. But also we ended up contacting the countrywide train system via rail that goes across Canada. It also has small rooms on the train. And we said, okay, we want to play shows across the country. Can you be our partner in transportation? And they were looking for entertainment on their train because a train journey is long. And so what we were able to do was actually do a number of live shows on the train with train passengers. And every night we would get off, we would play a show, and we'd get back on the next train the next morning. So we took a series of trains all over the country. We were able to play for free. We were able to sleep for free. We were able to play our shows at night. And the really awesome thing about it was that we had a built-in audience on the train across the country that didn't know our music, and then they would tell their friends at night. They would tell their friends at night, and then some of their friends would come to our shows in the city. The reason I share this is because it is kind of like an out-of-the-box idea. But also I wanted to share it because we all have things in our lives where we realize we're building skills that pertain to our work in the SDGs in ways that we don't think about. And so I really challenge you guys too to think about all the different ways in your lives you're building partnerships or thinking outside the box and how you can really flex that creative muscle. So if I can get the next slide, I want you guys now to do a bit of brainstorming with me around this concept. So this is a free library. I think these are accessible in a few different communities. I worked with a youth group in Florida that was putting up a few of these free libraries in parts of the city that were didn't have very high literacy rates. And I've seen this replicated in a couple different communities, but essentially it's a very simple concept that can become very complicated if you want it to be. This is a little library, you put it up, you fill it with books, people can take books and people can put their books in. And that way there's kind of a circular economy. This simple project touches on a ton of SDGs. We've got SDG 4 around education, SDG 10 around inequality, SDG 11 on sustainable communities, and then responsible consumption too. So if we look at this model, an example, I'm going to challenge you guys to literally think outside the no pun intended library box here. You can add things to the box. You can do things around the box, but how many stakeholders can you think of that can actually interact with a project like this? And I'm going to ask you to turn to the people next to you. If you have a notebook, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to maybe jot down ideas about what this could look like. And I want you to think of as many as possible stakeholders. Think as creatively as possible. I gave you the first 2 ones that are a little bit obvious, which is physical libraries, so the actual infrastructure of the box itself, and the end readers. But who else could you bring in? What else could you need? Who else could be stakeholders in the community? And we're going to do a little competition. I want to see who can actually come up with the most possible stakeholders. So I'll give you 5 minutes. Feel free to work in small groups, and then I'm really curious to share it and see how many we can come up with. Go. Yeah. You know what? Because you're already sitting in pews, it's going to be hard to reassemble. Just whoever's closest to you. Yeah. And you guys can feel free to cluster in the groups that you're in. For the whole thing. Maybe I'll stop. Okay. All right, I'm going to give you 1 more minute.
Excuse me, what the session is going on?
And for those of you joining online, to feel free to put comments in the chat or add your thoughts on the stakeholder strategy. How are we doing? Do people need more time, or do you think we can go? We're good. Okay. So, can I ask, how many groups have at least 5 stakeholders? Okay. How many groups have at least 10 stakeholders? Okay, amazing. How many have at least 15? At least 15? Put your hands up. Did you have at least 15? Okay, at least 20. Okay. More than 20. Okay. Awesome. Jennifer in the back, who's at 15, can you list out your 15 routes? Oh, 1 second. I'm just going to make sure that you have a mic so everyone can hear you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emmanuel. And so it got to the point where we almost everybody could do one. So we started with schools, elementary age, then up to high schools, university as well, teachers, students, families in the neighborhood associations, youth groups who are interested in building little libraries. Depending on the scale of the project, you could look at contacting your local government, mayor, other officials in the public works department to make a citywide initiative. You could even incorporate even like a sanitation department, because you might want to do a beautification project first, then build little libraries, kind of have this massive event that brings the stakeholders together. Then it would be a citywide event, and even more from there. So it just keeps exponentially growing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Video that we didn't hear yet. Yes.
So some of the other local stores and media writing groups, because people writing really interested in self-publishing where the beach libraries. Also artists, would be artists build and mini libraries. And also, after school programs, faith-based groups. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of ones that wasn't part of the school.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes.
Okay. Who has, some of them still have, fine. Just kidding. Anyway,
It's all.
so we do have key partners of this kind of project. We believe include local authorities, economic effective to that local authorities. You need their support both money and financial, and also or the local government. We also believe that interest groups play a critical role. Also, public school, private, religious groups, it depends on the society you have. Then this would also include traditional leaders. We also believe that it should involve CSOs and NPOs for partnership. Corporate entities, this could be local private corporations and other stuff. Private groups is very critical. They will help you another dimension about the society. And of course, we can't do this kind of thing without the media support.
Someone help me to translate because I speak French. I'm not very good. It's not watching.
Okay, he will.
I can help you too. Yeah.
Pour moi, ces genres de projets, on n'a pas besoin de partenaires à haut niveau. Ce qui se passe, c'est au niveau macro. On a besoin pour un premier temps, on a besoin de la communauté. Donc, pour avoir les livres, on a les anciens élèves qui sont là, qui à chaque année passent. Donc, ils n'ont pas besoin des livres qu'ils avaient l'année dernière. Donc, on va faire une communication. Chaque élève va nous donner leur livre. On va faire aussi, on va avoir des partenaires tels que la communauté en tant que telle, qui vont s'aider à avoir un local au niveau de la communauté. Parce que là, une bibliothèque rurale où les femmes dans la zone rurale et les élèves pourront venir de temps en temps et de lire. Donc, on a déjà le local, on a les anciens livres des élèves, on a aussi les médias. Les médias au niveau communautaire, les radios communautaires et les communautaires. Les télécommunautaires et les radios communautaires vont servir de relais d'information à travers la bibliothèque locale est mise en place pour les femmes issues de la zone rurale et pour les élèves. En plus de ça, les acteurs au niveau local vont jouer. On va organiser des concerts. Au lieu que ces concerts soient payants, donc on va dire que c'est un livre gratuit. Tu viens avec le livre et tu vas. Merci.
So really good thing here. So our friend was talking about students growing a grade level every year, and then they don't use their books. So students themselves can put books back in when they're not using them anymore for the students who are younger than them. She also talked about the women in the community, and she talked about media and making sure that media was able to kind of pinpoint where these libraries were. And then an awesome idea was to have a concert in the community around the library, and the concert would actually be, the ticket for a concert would actually be to bring a book, which is really cool. I love that. And over here. Yes?
So,
Oh, there's a mic coming your way.
we identify identify private schools.
Yep.
Project, and also about authorities, those localities all over So we have those folks for students. We talked about tourists, travels. We also like this. And the other problem is also a good response. And then we thought about local health care. Because some of these communities and China's was that rules for we also thought about religious groups. Communities was all this so they will also be able to thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. Great idea. Yes, this group had one of the highest ones, so I'm curious.
So yeah, we have many good ideas. But when we look at the group,
It does look like a bird.
yeah, exactly the point. So we kind of more than it looks kind of like a bird. So what if we would collaborate with companies that make bird houses, and then we could have bird designs like make it beautiful. So we have books on the front and a bird house on the back.
Ah,
So that was our idea. Many other things, but yeah, it's a great idea.
amazing. I like that. Look at two more, and you here, and then you back there. And I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak too. So if you've been able to speak already, I'm going to make sure that we give the mic to someone else, and then we come back so that everyone gets a chance to have their voice heard. Yes.
So I think okay. So basically, the idea, everything amazing idea, thank you so much. I think for us, you mentioned is like making it more accessible. So like maybe working with designers, architects, or engineers that maybe you can set up a system where it can like be lowered to different levels. So people who are using accessibility like mobility devices can easily access the library as well, and then those who are maybe for like visually impaired can also maybe have access to different books in there, maybe having a more inclusive environment for the libraries would be really good, having maybe like braille installation on it, and maybe having like tiered books to like, vulnerable communities such as visually impaired, of course. So yeah, that's just something that we were talking about, but might be a good idea.
Amazing. I think that's a great idea. And I think just to add to that, when thinking about potential partnerships around that, it's easy to see, like from your perspective, why this would be really helpful for the community. But when you're thinking about a partnership, you want to think about who would find mutual value in that. So maybe there's an organization that does work in Brill where their mandate is to make sure that inclusivity is there. And maybe a different community wouldn't need it in the same way that yours does. So really thinking about the mutual value add, and every community is going to be different in that. But that's just one example of thinking outside the partnership of not just why it's important, but then also finding a partner that exact thing is important to them too. Awesome. Thank you for that. And yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My name is Leo from Liberia. One idea I was thinking of, we can do basically set up of flyers to various institutions like colleges, high school businesses, and set up a particular day for a book draft through. So like for example, on like every first Saturday of a month or week, and all institutions like schools, people in the community, neighborhood can make a drive through to various businesses, like maybe a fast food, restaurant, whatever areas. They can just have a particular day, like every first Sunday of the day or every first Saturday of this week, which you're able to do this book to a particular location. That will also have to be able to have every institution, like school, colleges, businesses, in institution, in that community also be a part of that partnership and be able to have interest in working together in these books.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm just gonna share a little, I love these ideas, and some of these ideas I had never considered yet. When I've seen this project work before, there's a number of different things in different communities where it has worked. Volunteers was one thing that I hadn't heard from anyone. So who are going to be the people that make sure that these little libraries are stocked, for example? Right? Another group that I saw was in not only the area where the community was illiterate, it was also an area where things were getting stolen a lot. So they actually had the little library outside one of their police stations, so it was kind of always guarded. And somebody already talked about that in the group. They had also put QR codes on the book so that they could track just how many were taken out, and a volunteer would know when it was empty, and so it wasn't necessarily tracking in the books. There was partnerships with publishers when books were kind of being at the end of their run where they could donate them. So I just think this is a really cool example because every community can use a library in a different way, and the needs of every community are different. Some may be more kind of focused on diversity and accessibility. Others may be more kid-focused. Some might be more for the elderly. But really, this was just an exercise to kind of stretch our brain in all the different ways that we can think about partnerships and finding that kind of mutual value point through all of them. So thank you for playing the game with me. You guys did an awesome job at thinking outside the box for sure. So I just want to touch base really quickly before we get into questions and maybe a little fun music thing if we have time. Just around what successful partnerships look like. And so if I can just get that last slide. Like any relationship, trust is a big thing. So figuring out as the partnership moves forward, what does trust look like? What are your reporting requirements like? Do you need to reevaluate what those might look like? I think just communication is really key in making sure the partnership continues. And often, particularly with funders, the best person to invest in your project or your organization is someone who has before already. And so if you can keep those lines of communication open, you already have someone who has an incredible linkage and interest in what you're doing. And so you can kind of keep recycling that. You already have an advocate, you already have someone who's going to bring other people into what you're doing. So really just making sure that those lines of communication are open and maintained, I think, are a huge thing. So just as kind of a recap of my points before we go into some questions and maybe some singing if we can, is that partnerships are more than funding. That's the biggest takeaway, that there's many, many different ways that you can look at partnerships. And really, like we did with the library example, have an exercise where you think of every single possible stakeholder and see what that might generate for you and your ideas around potential partners. And it may surprise you what you come up with. The other big thing that I want to stress is think of a partnership the way you would think of any relationship or friendship that needs to be nurtured, that communication and trust needs to be built. Really think of it in the same way that you would think of your best friend, someone that you were potentially going to marry, and how would you respect and move forward that relationship? It would be with time and care and investment. And then the third, just like relationships, is we require ongoing active management. And I think with all of those things, including creativity, partnerships can be really, really powerful. So that was kind of the main takeaway part. The last slide, I'm putting up my contact information if anyone wants to reach out to me. Feel free to do that. I'm happy to answer questions, but I have time now for some questions too. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are on partnerships. If you have partnership ideas that have been really successful, what's going on out there? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really love it.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I really loved it a lot. So this is not about like activism, right, per se. This is talking about like business, right? Like, how would you apply like all of these wisdoms you spoke about today, for business wise? Because like I have a big business and I always wondered like, how can I be able to like show people the value of this and not just listen to us? Wow, it's just so good. I just wanted to know like what would be your advice in terms of how to be able to create partnerships, but for like a business. That's what I.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of the same principles apply. So firstly, congratulations for having your own bakery business. How wonderful. I think, yes. I kind of go back to the story piece too, of like, I'm so interested, and I think most people are, in like the why of your story. Why did you start this bakery? Why was it meaningful to you? What inspires you in the way that you create? What's different about you? You know? And I think that, like I said before about the linkage, interests, and ability in some ways, like who's linked to your product? And who are the people that really love your product who are gonna come back and be advocates and then build your network and all of those things. So I think, you know, they seem like very separate things, and that's why I included my train example too, is like all of these principles of relationship management and storytelling apply to everything. And so if you can find the linkage, you can find people that are interested in who those niche people are and really map out who are all the stakeholders who could touch your bakery and what's the easiest way to touch them that would be of a mutual shared value. You're still doing the exact same thing I talked about, but it's more from a business standpoint rather than a SDG standpoint. The same principles remain. Awesome question. Yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Prosper from Ghana. So I run a business that works with smallholder farmers. So I work with close to 5,200 smallholder farmers.
Amazing.
And so I want to understand from you, I see all these people as my partners. How do you manage a partnership like this where you have people who have varied demands and varied experiences? What's your advice on how to probably deal with that kind of partnership? Thank you.
Yeah, do you have staff? Or are you by yourself?
Do I have staff?
Okay, so sometimes I think of almost managing these partnerships as like mini communities and having different staff members manage a certain area of partnership. And seeing like what's the capacity of, you know, in some of the organizations that I've worked with, we've realized that like actually maybe we don't need as many partners as are coming forward. And what's the threshold of the line between where the partnership is beneficial and where it's actually more work for us to take on more partners. And so that may be a question that you think about when you're thinking about those like relationship deal breakers. Maybe you're very, very concise that like, we want to focus our area to partners like this because otherwise we can't service them as well or the partnership is not as meaningful. So I might have some more ideas, but just as a baseline, I think that might be like the stakeholder mapping of what you really want and what you don't want, as opposed to just taking every potential partner that comes in, may be something to consider. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I have everything to say. There can be some repetitions, but I will try to be short. Just to summarize whatever I have learned from you. Thank you for your speech. It is brilliant. I'm really very proud to be here and to hear your speech because you are inspiring, first of all. And we are learning. In 40 minutes, we have learned a lot of things. Thank you for that. And now just, as I said, we learn from each other, with each other. So just to summarize what my peers and my group members said, my vision is a life cycle. Whole in everything and everything in a whole. So tiny things in a whole and whole in tiny things. So it's a life cycle. We all are grown from seed and then becoming a plant, growing, blooming, and then again a seed back to the land. So it's a life cycle. So everything, the partnership is a life cycle. So the most important thing, just to summarize maybe, is like why you want to do. Who you want, who are you? Who are you? For who you want to do, what you want to do, when you want to do, how you want to do, and again, why you want to do. So, meaning the goals. Did you reach the goals, the impact, the values, results, outcomes, outputs? Did you make the monitoring, research? So if you're done with this, then your partnership is full. It's done.
Yeah.
So I can bring some 35, even 100 points if you're.
Amazing. No, I think that is a perfect summary. Thank you so much for that. And
I can
I
share it with you privately.
Wonderful.
Because the idea you said, I have a startup already.
Wonderful.
Yeah, on this idea.
Yeah, and I think sort of just building on that is that, thank you for that. That cycle can't necessarily be taken for granted too. So it's kind of, I think sometimes we also think like, we've got this partner in the bag, they're there forever, in the same way we do it with relationships. And so I can't really stress that ongoing piece of checking in and communicating to make sure you still have
One
that advocate.
short statement, please.
Yes.
As my colleague, my peer said, Shaky said, when I asked him, for whom is this library? He said, for everyone. Yes, it's for everyone, because human is in the center of the globe. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Humans are partnering with the globe and with other generations, with other humans.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to give time for someone in the back there who wanted to share, and then you.
Okay, my name is Fatih Baba. I wanted to find out whether seeking for partners is valid. The point is, I want to give a scenario.
Can you just repeat that first part? I was having
I
trouble.
wanted to wonder whether looking for partners looks like you are begging for something.
Okay.
See, I started a project on plastic recycling in schools. So this is what I did. I looked for a partner who is going to collect the plastics from me. And fortunately, that was during the COVID. They will collect the plastics and ship it to Tanzania and Zimbabwe also to turn it into plastic chairs and stuff.
Yeah.
So we're collecting the black plastic bags, the white, the sachet water, the bottles with schools. And you know, schools usually produce a lot of plastic bags and bottles. And you know what I decided to do in return for the kids collecting those plastic bags? They'll collect it from the schools and collect it from home. I'm trying to groom them on how to reduce plastic waste in the system.
Right.
Plastic waste is being polarized in Africa, in Ghana for that matter. I'm from Ghana.
Yeah.
I started it. So in return for the plastics, when they give it to me and I sell it to a company which is called Environment Risks in Accra, they'll pay for it. Then I use the fund to go and buy flowers, books, and pencils and give it to the schools. Any school that brings more of those things, get more of the seedlings or the flowers and the pens and pencils.
Yeah.
Guess what killed my project? The partner at the end of the day decided not to buy. I collected more plastics, bagged it in my garage. It was fuller, and it became waste in my house. So how do I continue to sustain my partners? I take it.
Yeah. Okay, great question. Thank you for that. So I wish I had all the answers to everything, but this is just unfortunately I don't. But I think I'm going to go back to the power of storytelling for a second. So if you were approaching a potential partner, you don't have to tell them that you have 10,000 pieces of plastic in your house collecting things. You can tell them the story about all of the impact that was made with the flowers, with the purchases to the schools, and maybe even share stories of impact of students that were touched or classrooms, or you can make videos of the students, or, you know, like, how could I as a potential funder know that somebody else passed? I don't even need to know somebody else passed on the opportunity. that there is an opportunity to create this type of impact, and our last partners did this, and would you like to come on board, feels very different than, oh, a partner just pulled out and now my garage is full of plastic, right? And so I think that the way that you tell that story and the way that you capture the impact that's clearly there because you were able to articulate it to me is super important to the next partner, and you don't need to put all the rest of the stuff into it. You can be more forward-thinking about what potential stakeholders will see value in the impact that you're creating now, and you have proof of it, which is amazing. You could, I mean, you can decide anything that you want to do, right? Awesome. Okay, we're coming right to time. Do we have 3 minutes left? Nothing left? Okay, nothing left. All right. I want to say a huge thank you to you guys for participating in this. If you want to reach me, email address is on the bottom. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of the day. I'm super inspired by your ideas. I can't wait to see all the change and impact you guys are making in the world. Thank you so much.
Stay tuned, everyone. We're starting the session right now.
Do we have time for a little singing activity or no? It's on the table. Okay.
Can I have a suggestion? I have a suggestion.